The Jehovah's Witnesses are suing the Norwegian government because the Norwegian government deregistered them as a religion and therefore it does not entitle them to any state grants or privileges or anything like that. And yeah, we have been covering the court case here on this channel. So we are in day 4. If you have missed any of the other videos, links will be in the description below covering what has been going on so far. With all that being said, let's do this. Hello and welcome back to the JW Thoughts channel. My name is Wally and today we're looking at day 4 of the Norwegian trial, which is full of a lot of nonsense and just perplexing arguments that are made. But we're going to get into that. But quickly before we get started, don't forget to drop a like on the video. It helps get out to more people on YouTube and subscribe to the channel. With all that being said, let's do this. Now, obviously, I wasn't in Norway when this was happening, nor do I speak Norwegian, so it wouldn't have made any difference if I was there anyway. But with all of that being said, we are getting a lot of this information from people that were there and reporting on what the proceedings looked like. So, as kind of a continuation of the previous day, day 3, in day 4, there's more time for Jehovah's Witnesses to sort of present their testimonies and come forward. And Jehovah's Witnesses took to the stand and did a similar song and dance as we talked about in the last video of, hey, I was disfellowshipped. It really wasn't that bad. Now, one of the more interesting aspects that came out was when the judge was asking them whether or not that their literature or their publications, their videos, all of that stuff, was a factor in their shunning policies. And from what I hear, the witnesses were not too forthcoming when it comes to this, because as we noted earlier at the very beginning, Watchtower didn't want any of their publications or videos or anything to be able to be admissible to the court, and the judge said that is nonsensical. Of course we have to look at this. And so when the judge was pressing the people that were taking the stand, they were having difficulty, or some might even say holding back information, but eventually did realize that, okay, yes, our publications do say don't talk to people that leave Jehovah's Witnesses, full stop. But they kept coming back to, hey, this is based on the Bible. Now, the interesting thing is that really based on the Bible, particularly when we're talking about family members? Can you produce scriptures that say, ignore your family? Because you can find a lot of scriptures that talk about trying to bring someone back into the, Christian faith or whatever, and the people that are part of your Christian community, how you need to show them even more attention and really put a lot of effort in. I mean, Jesus even gave the illustrations, better is it to find the pearl, or better is it to rescue one sheep. So there's those things directly from Jesus. So if you're just basing it off of the Bible, you get sort of a mixed bag and it's left to interpretation. And that's why the state and the court is trying to focus not on something that's interpretive, like what does the Bible really mean when it's saying X, Y, or Z, but they're trying to focus on what does your literature, what do your videos, what do they portray the process of disfellowshipping actually is. So I'm glad that that was the case. But apart from that, the second aspect of the second day of Jehovah's Witnesses testimony was an expert witness, which I don't know what to think about this guy. In the afternoon, Watchtower brought in a expert witness. Now, before we get into this whole thing, I'm not an expert. I don't know. I'm not claiming that I have intimate knowledge about anything. But it's my opinion, it's my understanding that whatever side of a court case is bringing forth a witness, that sometimes comes with a cost. I don't think that this guy is going to show up and want to defend the Jehovah's Witnesses out of the goodness, the kindness of his heart. The point I'm making is sometimes there can be this thing called science for sale or experts for hire. Now, the reason I bring this up is because there is a whole organization out there called CESNR, the Center for Studies of New Religions. I know that might not quite translate because it's an Italian organization, or that's at least where it started. And this guy named Massimo Introvine, and Massimo Introvine is a real piece of human turds. He's a real pile of poop. This guy spends his life defending the likes of Scientology, Jehovah's Witnesses, weird cults, what they call new religions. He's a cult apologist, essentially, and he gives his expert opinions. Now, I was fairly convinced that this guy must have ties with that, but I couldn't find any myself. I say all of this to say that there is a network, a group of quote-unquote experts on human rights and religious freedom that cults, groups, weird organizations like Scientology and Jehovah's Witnesses and Mormons, that they hire to help them give expert opinions whenever they go to court. So again, I don't know if he has any connections. I couldn't find any myself, but maybe someone smarter than me out there could figure it out. But this guy, Hattie Stroman Lyle, I don't know if his last name is Lyle, but I like Napoleon Dynamite memes, so...
Hey, Lyle.
That's what we're going to call him. Anyway, going on from this article, it says, Lyle explained that the decisions assume that the exclusion practice involves negative social control, which in turn violates children's rights under the UN Convention on the Rights of the Child. Lyle finds it difficult to see that this is the case. He began by stating that there is a high threshold under the convention for an action to be considered a violation. He pointed out that the Children's Convention is an agreement entered into by almost all the world's states, and the provisions are generally formulated to encompass very different states like Norway and Sudan. For something to be a violation of the convention, there must be agreement among the states on this. In addition, the threshold for something to be a violation of the convention is high. Jehovah's Witnesses' exclusion practice is an old tradition that has been practiced long before the Children's Convention. For this practice to be considered a violation now, there must have been a development that makes all the states party to the convention consider it a violation. I can't see that it has happened, said Lyle. I gotta be honest. I don't know if this guy's real. Brother, you cannot make an argument that because Sudan is not going to agree to protecting human rights in the same way that Norway is going to, that therefore you should let the Jehovah's Witnesses off for violating children's rights for free. Brother, I'm not like an expert or anything, but I think I'm correct. It's Sudan. Weren't they under Sharia law up until like 2019? 2019. Before that, they were chopping people's hands off. They were stoning women for going to a marketplace by herself. I don't know how you are going to make that kind of argument. It is absolutely baffling. Now, some of this might be lost in translation, but all of this seems very confusing. But let's just go to this initial claim. What this newspaper claimed that he said was that he explained that the exclusion practice involves negative social control, and he finds it difficult to see this as the case. What would qualify as social control to you, Lyle? I want to know what you would quantify as social control, because you can have someone that is homeschooled, maybe can barely read at like a first grade level, that gets baptized because of pressure from their parents when they're 11, 12 years old. They don't even know how to read the organized book hardly, but they are coached by their parents and by the elders to give the answers necessary. Boom, plunk, you're baptized. Now you enter a contract with the Watchtower organization for life. When you don't know what's going on, you don't know about disfellowshipping, you don't know about how they arrive that they are the one true organization, you don't know that if you want to have a girlfriend or marry someone outside of the organization, that you would get kicked out of it. Pile on top of that, every single person that you've ever had any meaningful contact with in your entire life is part of the Jehovah's Witnesses. So this is the situation. And yet you think it's difficult to find that is a negative social control? Well, I don't know, like, beyond kidnapping someone and putting them in like the back of a van, getting them hooked on fentanyl so they can work the street, trapping out. Like, what is that the only form of negative social control in your little peanut brain? Do you not understand what is going on within the organization? That situation, that scenario that I just painted is real. It happens every single day across the world. I don't know why you would die on this hill. Of all the things that you can spend your life, you can hook your namesake, that you want your legacy to be known for that, why would you do something so boneheaded as to be like, oh, I don't really think the Jehovah's Witnesses have any negative social control? It's unbelievable. We'll go a little bit farther in this article, and Wally will probably rant for a bit longer, so everyone can enjoy. I don't know why I said that like that. That was very odd. Both the ministry and the state administrator have referred to Article 19 of the Children's Convention, which protects children from psychological abuse. But what constitutes psychological abuse is up to an individual state to determine, according to Lyle. He argued extensively that the states are not free to interpret the content of the convention as they wish. If something is to be a violation, it must be so in all states party to the convention. Quote, if each party interprets the convention as they please, it undermines the entire principle of international law that is an agreement between the parties. Again, his whole thing here, it's so confusing and weird. Like, I don't get it. Like, how are you just going to come up to a state that has the ability to interpret things for their country, for Norway, and then say, well, I really don't think you guys should, so can I get my paycheck now? It's so bizarre. The professor then went through a general comment from the UN Committee on Rights of the Child, attempting to define what psychological abuse entails. He showed that isolation is mentioned as something that can be psychological abuse. Then it becomes a question of interpretation whether religious exclusion can be read into it. I think that goes a bit far. The reason for this is that the exclusion practice is an old argument not mentioned at all in the general comment. Bro thinks that psychological abuse can include isolation, but isn't sure if this has anything to do with the disfellowshipping practice. As someone that's been isolated, as someone that's been excluded, to this point, I don't even know if I'm disfellowshipped, but yep, that's another point, is you don't even have to be disfellowshipped to experience the shunning. When you experience this, your entire social structure is taken from you. Remember, when you're a Jehovah's Witness, and we could read articles out the wazoo talking about limiting your contact with worldly people, people in the world, people that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. Essentially, if you're not preaching to someone that's not a Jehovah's Witness, you really shouldn't be talking to someone that's not a Jehovah's Witness. That is the life. That is how they are raised. If you took a poll of 10,000 ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that grew up, not angry apostates, just people giving their honest opinion about what it was like, that they would all tell you the exact same thing. It is very isolating. You do not have friends. If you have family that's not Jehovah's Witnesses, you don't see them. You're not invited to Thanksgiving. You don't get to go to those family gatherings with people that aren't Jehovah's Witnesses. It is your entire life. So when you are removed from that, and the members that are Jehovah's Witnesses are told to not talk to you anymore, what the hell do you call that other than isolation? If you agree that psychological abuse involves isolation in this way, or, hey, you know what? Let's take it a step further. If you agree that discrimination would be a factor in this, go and find me a gay Jehovah's Witness. I'll be waiting here forever because like they exist, but they won't tell you about it because they can't tell you about it. Or if they are, it is discrimination against anyone of the LGBTQI plus community. It just is. They straight up discriminate against anyone that identifies as something other than straight. They full on discriminate. So if a child gets baptized with not even really understanding, or let's say they even do understand all of the rules and everything. Okay, bada bing, bada boom, you're 10 years old, you get baptized. And then when you actually hit puberty, you realize that you might be attracted to someone of the same sex as you, or you might identify as something different. Well, boy howdy, you have no recourse because you will be discriminated against and you will face social isolation. This nutsack man needs to go away with his expert opinions. I don't have any respect for someone that can look at the Jehovah's Witnesses practices and be a quote-unquote expert and are willing to go to a court to defend this, to collect a paycheck. Now, I will say that this is all translated, so maybe some things are lost in translation, so maybe we shouldn't be too harsh on this guy and call him a total nutsacks for brains, but you know what? Here on the JW Thoughts channel, anyone that wants to defend Jehovah's Witnesses and their shunning policies and the effect it has on children, even if there are some translation issues, we're still going to call you a nutsack for brains. Anyway, at the same time, he pointed to the so-called margin of appreciation. This means that states have some discretion to implement their own laws that provide greater rights than children have under the Children's Convention. It cannot be used to interpret the convention itself in a way that gives more profound rights than agreed upon among the states. It opens the door for stricter laws, not stricter interpretations. Even though Norway has the opportunity to do so, the legislature has not passed any law on this point that grants better rights, he noted. He also referred to a report that has not conclusively stated that negative social control is not a legal concept in Norwegian law. The whole point of this is that they're trying to implement this to be a law. That is why they had updated policies with their Children's Protective Act, or whatever it was called. Is they were adding protections because of fundamental problems with groups like Jehovah's Witnesses. You make the laws, you increase the violations in construction zones when you're driving, because it makes people more aware. Oh man, I normally would get a $200 fine, but do I really want a $500 fine? Yeah, I don't think so. I'm going to slow down through construction zones. You make and change laws based off of problems that you see. You see a problem with what is going on in certain groups and organizations and how they are effectively doing this psychological abuse, this psychological violence. They're violating children's rights. So you change and you adapt the laws. It's not that complicated. I don't know why you would go back. Well, I mean, we haven't really had anything in the past. So, hey guys, why do we want to start changing things now? Can't we just get back to the good old days of the old boys clubs? No, we're not going back to those days. We're better now. Shout outs to Post Malone. Now, to round out the end of this, another point made by the legal scholar was that Article 19 of the Children's Convention gives the state the duty to implement child protection measures to safeguard the child. According to the Child Welfare Act, children have the right to child protection measures when there are grounds to believe that serious neglect is taking place. In cases where such a situation may arise, the state also has an obligation to report to Child Protective Services, Lyle pointed out. If they believe that Jehovah's Witnesses engage in negative social control, there is reason to believe it would be serious neglect. Why haven't you reported to Child Protective Services? Lyle asked, referring to the prosecution. Drop the goddamn mic, baby, because clearly, I mean, they haven't been the Jehovah's Witnesses who are doing the neglect, who are engaging in negative social control. They haven't been reporting that to Child Protective Services. I wonder why. Maybe, it doesn't sound like they're doing anything wrong, or else they would have been reporting it. Brother, unless you had whistleblowers, unless you had people willing to speak out, unless you had laws changed, do you think that the Jehovah's Witnesses, the Catholic Church, any organization that is facing serious allegations when it comes to their handling of CSA would have just willfully reported? Do you think that the best argument you can make is that, well, I mean, they haven't actually been reporting anything, so I don't see how anything could be wrong? It's so baffling. It's like this guy isn't real. So, very confusing testimony by this quote-unquote expert. I don't know who this guy is or if he's just an expert for hire, but based off of this article and comments that were made by people that were attending, was that it was kind of confusing the arguments that he was trying to make, and it just didn't make a whole lot of sense to a rational person. So I think Watchtower maybe were trying to come in with a big hitter here, and they came in with a big stinker. Anyway, if you're still around, don't forget to drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel, and all of that good stuff. Tomorrow, we're going to be talking about the ex-Jehovah's Witnesses that gave their testimony, and so much respect for these dynamic, beautiful, powerful, strong people that are really there on the front lines, putting themselves out there and helping to help world governments understand what it's like to be a Jehovah's Witness. So we're going to go over some of that tomorrow. So, yep, I'll see you guys then.